So, my Vampire Chronicles obsession has come back full force with the AMC adaptation of season 2, and I need somewhere to put all of my thoughts, basically. I don't have my backdrop and whatnot with me, so we're just gonna have to cope with, the wall, but it's whatever. Hello from my phone. Quick thing, I forgot to mention that I was having issues with my camera focusing. This will not be an issue for episode 2 or going forward. Some funky settings thing that I couldn't figure out. So you're just gonna have to deal with it for a little bit. I'll continue to let you watch me yapping now, or what you can see of me yapping. So for each episode, I'm going to be doing videos that are breaking down and debriefing and analyzing not just the show, but the text and dialogue that has been pulled from the text and been put directly into the show, which I have been totally freaking out about. And I don't even know where to start. There's just so much. I'm gonna try to keep this specifically revolving around the first book, which we all know is Interview with the Vampire. That might prove to be a little difficult because they are pulling things from other books in the series, but that's just what this is going to consist of. Me yapping over pretty much every episode because I can't contain it, and I have so many documents full of just information that I need to word vomit. I need someone to word vomit with. So if that's gonna be my camera, so be it. I just need to get it out somehow. I'm kind of doing this backwards considering I'm starting with season 2 and not season 1, but with every episode coming out on Sunday, I need to verbally vomit while this is fresh in my mind and ride the high of that. I'll probably do season 1 at some point, but for now I'm sticking with season 2. I don't know what my upload schedule is going to be like, but I'll try my best with it. As we all know, this is not spoiler free for the books or for the show, so you have been warned, and click away if you don't want to get spoiled, because I will inevitably spoil something. So at the beginning of this episode, we really see the distance that's grown between both Claudia and Louis, and there are really some unspoken feelings that are there between the two of them, but I primarily think that it's within Claudia. Some of it might have to do with the fact that they united over killing Lestat, and now that he's removed from the equation, or so we think he is, there's an absence and they don't really know how to fill it. I think this absence is being filled with Claudia, especially by, going and adventuring, trying to find more vampires because they know that they're out there. They just don't really know what they're in for yet. Yikes. And then we see Hallustat or Dreamstat, whatever you want to call him, and I might need to seek psychiatric help because when I say he looked so fine, I thought I was going to fall to my knees. Maybe I'm biased because I think that, everyone looks better covered in a bit of blood. Maybe that's just a me problem, but whatever. I'm gonna dive more into Louis hallucinating Lestat a bit later, so we will circle back to that. After Louis and Claudia travel around quite a bit, Claudia still being very adamant about finding other vampires. They go to Dracula's castle and whatever, which I think was really cute. It was, a nod to Dracula, and I mean, how can you not have that in vampire media? Louis and Claudia arrive in this rundown village, and Claudia, being full of hope, is desperate to look for any sign of vampires, and Louis is just convinced that this place is like desolate and that there's nobody there. And then Claudia says this:
"Folks left. So who ran garlic around these doors? Who nailed the crucifix to the wall?
Why don't you knock?"
Louis then goes on to claim that Claudia's books are bullshit, and he goes on and on about that. And Claudia has this attachment to these books, both in the show and first book. She treated these books that contain myth and knowledge on vampires as pretty much her personal Bible. In the book, Claudia goes, "Louis, the garlic, the crucifix above the door." While what Claudia said wasn't the exact dialogue from the book, it is still very similar, which I am pleased with, so yippee. Louis and Claudia run into soldiers yet again, and they're pretending to be father and daughter. And when Claudia pulled out this photo after she pulled out the papers to show the Russian soldiers, my jaw was on the floor because I was not expecting it. Because I don't know if you caught it, but I definitely did. The photo of her mother that they were using was a photo of Grace. And the photo looked like it was in such good condition, meaning Louis had carried it with him around this whole fucking time and took care of it. Louis loves his sister, Louis loves Grace, and I stand by that. And, even after they're parting in season 1, he still loves her. That's still his sister, and he still carries a piece of her literally wherever he goes. And then during this interaction with the soldiers, a woman cuts in, and then we learn that this woman is Emily. After the soldiers leave, she tells them this:
"Nu apta noi de umblat pe drumuri, ci cum copil."
In the book, this is very similar, And it's written like this. "The night's no time for traveling," she said to me in a peculiar flat voice, "and with a child." So one thing I wanted to add on about, Emily, or this woman, is that in the book, this woman is actually unnamed and it isn't Emily. Honestly, I didn't mind this change because it adds more attachment to Emily's character instead of, in the book, they go into this farmhouse or something that it's supposed to be, and Emily's already dead, and Morgan is already mourning her dead body on this table in this farmhouse. Claudia and Louis then follow Emily into this place, and this is how it's described in the book. The small, low-beamed room was filled with people, men and women along the rough, paneled walls, on benches, and even on the floor. It was as if the entire village were gathered there. I think the atmosphere and the set of this scene was done extremely well. Even though the location had changed from the book, it's not really a big deal at all in my opinion. Some people are really up their ass about some of these changes, but for the time period that they're in, I guess it would make more sense for it to be an abandoned factory than an inn farmhouse thing. Going more off the book, Louis explains, "No one mentioned for us to sit or offered us anything," which is true. We saw that reflected in the show. Nobody really gave two fucks that they were there, but they were more apprehensive, who did this bitch just bring in? We're all skeptical of literally everything because, there's vampires and World War II just ended. We got Russian soldiers out there. It's fair. You can't really trust everyone. Louis also describes in the book that the woman had a cup of wine waiting when I returned and a bowl of broth. Emily did serve them some type of soup or broth or whatever, and while there was no wine, they did drink the vodka that Louis and Claudia had brought. So, a win's a win. Let's fast forward a bit to when Louis and Claudia are in the broiler room after Claudia had encountered that raggedy ass fucking vampire, which I will expand on what that was a bit later. I still think it's funny the way that she approached Louis when he was dancing with Emily. What was it?
I fell out of a tree.
I fell out of a tree. She looked so done with everything. Claudia might as well have just backhanded Louis in the face when she said this.
What if you can't take your ballroom dancing and tell you you're pretty? Hell with him, is that it?
Because, oh my god, the way she got him. She fucking, got him. I'm just sitting there thinking about Lestat and the Mardi Gras ball. They go on to argue a bit more about Claudia wanting to know other vampires, and then Louis says this.
I mean, what are we looking for here? Adam and Eve are the damned?
All I could think of when Louis had said this was Akasha and ankle. Could this be some foreshadowing? Possibly, I don't know. Maybe I'm just crazy and looking for things where they aren't. But that's the whole point of me making these videos. I also think it's worth noting that Claudia is going on this journey to find other vampires despite being told not to, much like Lestat did when he was looking for Marius. So, like father, like daughter, as it is what it is. I also do feel really bad for Claudia and how she's misunderstood and all the things that she's been through, especially when she had said this. "I've known exactly 4 vampires in my life and you've all been the worst. Lestat, Antoinette, the motherfucker, and you." She is so desperate for a sense of belonging both in the book and the show, and we all know how that ends. Not too great. A little later, they wake up to some type of commotion and they go on to go see what it is, only to find Emily moaning and groaning in pain on the table with everyone else surrounding her, and Morgan, rightfully so, losing his shit. He begs Louis for help and says, "Louis or Robert, whoever the hell you are, just help me." Of course, he's asking for help because he has nobody else. They all want to kill Emily because they saw that she'd been bitten by a vampire, and he's just insisting that she needs medical attention, yada yada yada. As I mentioned a bit before in the book, we know that by the time that Louis and Claudia arrived, Emily was already long dead. And what was happening there was Morgan was begging Louis and pleading him to help him to prevent the locals from mutilating Emily's body because they were in fear of her rising and feasting on all of them. Though the situation does differ a little bit in the book, we still have Morgan seeking out Louis for help. And then at one point he does explain what they want to do with Emily's body. "I'll tell you, they took a stake, a wooden stake mind you, and this one in the grave. He took the stake with a hammer and he put it right to her breast. I didn't believe it. And then with one great blow he drove it right into her. I tell you, I couldn't have moved even if I'd wanted to. I was rooted there. And then that fellow, that beastly fellow, he reached up for his shovel and with both his arms he drove it sharp right into the dead woman's throat. The head was off like that." And then another little excerpt. Slowly, Morgan looked up at me, his eyes wild. It's what they wanted to do with her, he said. With Emily. Well, I won't let them. He shook his head adamantly. I won't let them. You've got to help me, Louis. His lips were trembling and his face so distorted by his sudden desperation that I might have recoiled from it despite myself. In the show, we do see Louis hesitating a little bit to help Morgan, but then eventually he follows Claudia and leaves the crowd. She almost beckons him, asking, whether telepathy powers, are you coming or not? This scene is interesting to me because show Louis seems to be a lot more experienced with emotionally closing himself off to humans. He can reason with himself to not get looped up in mortal affairs. In the book, when this happens, Louis is very quick to interject himself into what's happening with Morgan and his dead wife. And Louis, being a vampire, knows that Emily's dead and she won't turn. And without revealing that he's a vampire, he tries to pretty much explain that, she's not going to turn. She's dead. She's been dead for whatever amount of time. You don't need to go ahead with this. And then it does take Claudia to convince Louis to leave it. I just find the change in the show really interesting because while he's still very attached to his humanity, it's almost like he's putting Claudia's journey for finding other vampires first, and Claudia is very not often put first. I'd like to add an excerpt from the book that I think also applies to this very specific situation. It's when Louis and Claudia are riding off on horses after they had left the inn to go find this vampire that everyone's talking about. It was all tangled with my own horrified anticipation of meeting the thing which had killed Emily, but the thing which was unquestionably one of our own. But Claudia was in a frenzy. If she could have driven the horses herself, she would have taken the reins. Again and again, she urged me to use the whip. I was going to bring up the episode title a bit later, but I also think it's kind of relevant to this excerpt in the book. In the show, when Louis says, "What after all can the damned really say to the damned?" I think this kind of mirrors what Louis is feeling in that moment, with that unsettling feeling of not knowing what this vampire thing is or what to expect when they do go meet it. And I think this also really highlights Claudia's all-consuming urgency to find and discover other vampires, no matter what the cost is. So off they go to go meet that funky-looking vampire that Claudia had encountered before on her own. They lure him out with an injured soldier and kind of wait for the vampire to come out and take his fill. And I think Louis' reaction to seeing this vampire for the first time is just hilarious. It's a big contrast between Claudia being like, "Oh my god, it's one of us," and Louis standing there like, bitch, what the fuck is that? I'll play the scene here.
No, I'm a vampire. That's a fucking catfish with teeth.
That's a fucking catfish with teeth. Then who we later learn is Daciana. I think I'm pronouncing that right. But yeah, she attacks Louis. The decrepit looking vampire doesn't seem to be too pleased with this, and then he goes and he attacks Louis, knocking over Claudia in the process, and this whole kerfuffle. Claudia then beats the absolute shit out of this vampire and pulls its eyes out. Okay, good for you. You go, girl. All right, you gotta do what you gotta do. And then Daciana takes it upon herself to bludgeon to death this strange looking vampire with a stone. That's a rough way to go out. In the book, it's kind of a similar way that this thing meets its end, but a big stone falls and basically cracks its skull open and it dies that way. Same kind of death, just a different way it was done. And I think it's worth noting that other than Antoinette, this is the first woman vampire that Claudia has ever met in all her years of living. Pausing here, let's go over what that scrungly ass fucking vampire was. Later in the book, we learn from Armand that this is a Revenant. I was super excited when all the teasers and trailers were coming out for season 2, and we saw a bit of footage of that because I was like, holy shit, we're getting a Revenant vampire? That is so cool, because that is something the 90s film just totally skipped over, which kind of sucks. So I was really excited about seeing that adapted. So Armand goes to explain what this thing is, and he says, "Their blood is different, vile. They increase as we do, but without skill or care. Those revenants, they will attack you as if you were human." And that's exactly what that thing fucking did. Another thing that was changed about the Revenant arc is we don't know what the fate of Morgan is. We don't know what happens to him. And personally, not to be morbid and all, but if I saw my wife, who was still alive, mind you, get hacked to death and beheaded with an axe, yeah, that might drive me to fucking end it all right then and there. No thanks. In the book, when Claudia and Louis come across the Revenant, they see the Revenant hauling a human body over his shoulder, and then they realize that it's Morgan. Morgan ends up dying eventually of blood loss. I think that's what's implied. And then Claudia was trying to basically convince Louis to drink from him, but Louis was losing his shit and like totally was like, I'm not doing that. No. This is a little excerpt of what happened in the book. Better that he not wake, better that he never wakes at all. I wanted to say she was walking towards him, passing indifferently the dead thing that had nearly killed us both. I saw her back and the man stirring in front of her, his foot twisting in the grass. I don't know what I expected to see as I drew nearer, what terrified peasant or farmer, what miserable wretch that had already seen the face of that thing that had brought it here, and for a moment I did not realize who it was that lay there, that it was Morgan, whose pale face showed now in the moon, the marks of the vampire on his throat, his blue eyes staring mute and expressionless before him. So who exactly is Daciana? And I think that is something that's kind of left open to interpretation because she was not a character in the books. She was an addition to the show by our wonderful writers at AMC. I want to credit at Slay Sweet on Twitter. I'll screenshot it and put it here somewhere. But essentially they had brought up the idea that Daciana was some kind of retcon version of Alessandra. And if you're familiar with the books, she's introduced in the Vampire Lestat as like the mad old queen of the Children of Darkness, and she stays in the crypt under Les Innocents. I think that's how you say it. So what I'm about to say is kind of a stretch, but I thought it was kind of worth noting, or maybe a possibility, because in the book, like, Louis tells Daniel about this other vampire that they encounter. When we found these creatures at all, I remember a handful at most. Sometimes we only watched them from a distance, all too familiar with their wagging bovine heads, their haggard shoulders, their rotted, ragged clothing. In one hamlet, it was a woman, only dead for perhaps a few months. The villagers had glimpsed her and knew her by name. It was she who gave us the only hope that we were to experience after the monster in Transylvania, and that hope came to nothing. She fled from us through the forest, and we ran after her, reaching out for her long black hair. Her white burial gown was soaked with dried blood, her fingers caked with the dirt of the grave, and her eyes, they were mindless, two pools that reflected the moon. No secrets, no truths, only despair. So Daciana definitely looked like she had been dead for some time. She was close enough to the factory that all the townsfolk were staying at that maybe they could have possibly known who she was, but there was nothing in the show that alluded to that. I guess she technically was encountered after the first Revenant vampire, but it was really at the same time. And we learned that, you know, she was the maker of this Revenant vampire, like the mother. She was indeed wearing a long dress, and they did chase her through the forest, and she was definitely dirty as all hell and had some very sad looking eyes, the poor woman. This could also just be a coincidence. Maybe they took inspo from it, but as I said, this is probably a stretch. After Louis and Claudia talk to Daciana, we do see her throw herself into the fire. Now, stay with me here. This is something I think is very important, at least to me, but also to Lestat and Claudia's characters, especially with the dynamic of Claudia and Lestat's characters. Whether you like it or not, Claudia and Lestat are very much alike. And I think the writers are trying to show that by making these connections. Despite all the loathing Claudia has for Lestat, that is still her vampire father. Claudia watching Daciana throw herself into the fire is very much like how Lestat watched Magnus, his maker, throw himself into the fire. This has gone over in the Vampire Lestat and also mentioned briefly in season 1. Once again, I think the writers are doing a wonderful job at showing how Claudia and Lestat are really two sides of the same coin, like father, like daughter. I remember when the episode came out, someone on Twitter had said something, like it was a quote from something that was like, "My father is the worst man in the world and I am his favorite daughter," captioning the photo of a picture of Claudia and Lestat from the end of the episode. Louis then says after Daciana kills herself, and that is how we met the old world vampire. In the book, we see something similar. We had met the European vampire, the creature of the old world, he was dead. That was also about the Revenant and not about Daciana, because as I had just explained, Daciana did not exist in the book. Then we cut back to like the present day during the interview or whatever, and Louis and Armand are in their little bedroom. Louis confronts Armand about the pages in Claudia's diary, and it's like, oh brother, here we go. Also, they both just have like their feet out for free. And here we also see Louis kind of fighting with himself and his recollection of the events that had happened in the past. And Armand is being, you know, well, Armand. Also, the way that Armand is an iPad baby, like I know it's like to control the security and whatever the fuck in the house, but I just know he would have loved Cocomelon. I saw someone on TikTok make an intro to an edit of Armand on his iPad watching like a Cocomelon. There was like a baby stimuli YouTube video. I'll find it. When it cuts back to the interview, all I can think about is Devil's Minion and how bad Armand wants to fuck that old man. And I think he should. I really think he should. And then the little comment earlier when Louis and Armand were in bed about the interview being Daniel's drug. Ooh. Ooh, the foreshadowing. Daniel cutting off Armand was so funny too. Like that finger wave. Where is it? I'll find it and I'll put it here. I know Armand wanted to beat. Like he wanted to commit elder abuse in that moment. I know he did. Louis then goes on about how they went to Paris and all that stuff and says they go because it is the mother of New Orleans, which is something that Louis also does mention in the book. And then we see Louis and Claudia tearing off to Paris, which is really no surprise to anyone, and more of Hallustat. That scene in the back of the truck was so gut-wrenching, and you can really see how badly Claudia wants to believe what Louis is saying. It's you and me, it's me and you. She really wants to believe him. But she knows deep down that Louis carries Lestat with him everywhere he goes. The way that when Louis is doing that mini monologue, it pans over to Lestat and he's looking at Claudia. Enough. I had to tap out. And we know that this hallucination of Lestat is all in Louis's head. It's his manifestation of Lestat. It's how he remembers him, and I think how he wants him to be or wanted him to be. And I think this really important paragraph from the book adds some context as to why Louis carries Lestat with him and can't let him go. I wanted to forget him, and yet it seemed I thought of him always. It was as if the empty nights were made for thinking of him. And sometimes I found myself so vividly aware of him, it was as if he had only just left the room and the ring of his voice was still there. And somehow there was a disturbing comfort in that, and despite myself, I'd envision his face, not as it had been the last night in the fire, but on the other nights. That last evening he spent with us at home, his hand playing idly with the keys of the spinet, and his head tilted to one side. A sickness rose in me, more wretched than anguish, when I saw what my dreams were doing. I wanted him alive. In the dark nights of Eastern Europe, Lestat was the only vampire I'd found. And I do firmly believe that this is a direct connection to Hallustat, to Dreamstat, to whatever. Lestat is living within his consciousness and he can't let him go. So he's kind of manifesting him out of guilt. Though in the book it says that Louis is seeing him, Lestat, as he usually was. In the show, we are seeing Lestat after Claudia and Louis had committed attempted murder. But eventually, by the end of the episode, when they were in the truck, the blood that was soaked on his blouse was not there anymore. No matter how much Louis denies his yearning and desire and almost regret and clearly guilt in killing Lestat, he cannot let him go. They are forever intertwined. Now, before anyone yells at me because the internet is insane when it comes to Lestat and their pairing, it's crucial to remember that these are complex characters with complex relationships. Do I ship them? Yes. Do I ship everyone else? Yes. I cannot help it. I am gay. I'm but a gay and I'm goth and I like when my vampires kiss. It's important to remember that these are vampires, and applying our moral compass and moral code to them will always end messy. Like, it will always end messy no matter what. Because vampires aren't meant to be morally good characters. They're meant to be morally gray, or sometimes even evil. I love when my vampires are evil. Let all the vampires in this show be evil, please. Let them be evil and allow them to be evil and accept them and love them for being evil. But that does come to the end of me blabbing about episode 1. I do have episode 2 like written up and finished. I just need to film it, and I might do that. So if I'm wearing the same clothes and sitting in the same spot, no, I'm not. I hope everyone enjoyed my rambling and screaming about these things and loves the show and these books as much as I do. If I missed something, or if you found something to be incorrect, like factually, or I made a mistake, please feel free to let me know. Please let me know in the comments. I would really appreciate it, because there's literally so many books and there's so much content within this franchise, the books and the show, that like it's impossible to get everything down correctly all the time. Thanks for tuning in. Peace.